The handwriting told me everything I needed to know about the forgery before the lawyer even finished his question. Looping G's, inconsistent pressure, hesitation marks at the beginning of each signature. Amateur work, really. I'd seen better fakes from college kids trying to doctor their parents' signatures. Ms. Mitchell, your expert opinion on these documents? The attorney's voice pulled me from my analysis. The signatures don't match, I said flatly, pushing my blonde hair behind my ear. Whoever did this didn't account for the natural rhythm in handwriting. We all have it, like fingerprints but with pen strokes. This was my 43rd case this year. At 42, I'd seen every kind of forgery imaginable in Boulder's legal system. The courtroom emptied, and I packed my magnifying equipment into my worn leather case. Another day, another liar exposed. That night, my apartment felt emptier than usual. The silence crawled under my skin until I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned my radio on, scrolling through stations until a voice stopped my finger mid-dial. Welcome back to Midnight Confessions. I'm your host, the Midnight Scribe. The voice was female, smooth like whiskey poured over ice. Something about it pulled at me, made me sink into my couch and really listen. She spoke about connection in a disconnected world, about the dying art of handwritten letters. In a world of keyboards and touchscreens, what happens to the part of our soul that bleeds through the pen? She asked, and damn if I didn't feel like she was speaking directly to me. I fell asleep to that voice, dreaming of ink and paper and hands I couldn't quite see. The next morning, work called before dawn. A new case, urgent. The courthouse steps were slick with early autumn rain as I rushed up them, coffee sloshing from my travel mug. Judge Morris's clerk met me at the door, worry lines creasing his forehead. Thanks for coming in early, Maya. We've got a situation with the Henderson estate documents. What am I looking at? I asked, following him to the evidence room. Anonymous letter delivered yesterday. Claims the will was forged. The family's ready to tear each other apart. The letter sat on the examination table, and the moment I saw it, something cold slithered down my spine. The handwriting was familiar in a way that made no sense. The loops of the letters, the distinctive cross of the T's, I knew this handwriting, but that was impossible. It was my mother's handwriting, my mother who had died 15 years ago. I swallowed hard, pulling on my gloves. Who delivered this? Security footage shows a courier. Nothing suspicious, but the letter itself. He trailed off. I leaned closer, examining the paper. High-quality cotton stock, expensive. The ink was iron gall, old-fashioned. My mother had used the same kind. I'll need time with this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As he left, I traced the loops of the letters without touching the paper. The handwriting wasn't just similar to my mother's, it was identical, down to the slight upward tilt at the end of each sentence. But there was more. Something in the phrasing, the cadence of the written words. It reminded me of the radio host from last night. The Midnight Scribe. I pulled out my phone and searched for the show. There was almost nothing online, just a simple page with broadcast times and a tagline. Words written in the heart, spoken to the night. No host name, no photos. That evening, I stayed late at the courthouse, examining the letter again and again. The security guard's footsteps echoed down the hall as he made his rounds. Working late again, Ms. Mitchell? He asked, poking his head in. Just finishing up, I lied. After he passed, I slipped the letter into a protective sleeve and tucked it into my bag. I knew I shouldn't remove evidence, but something about this was personal, too personal to ignore. Back home, I tuned into Midnight Confessions again. The same voice filled my apartment, wrapping around me like smoke. Tonight we talk about secrets, the Midnight Scribe said. The ones written between the lines, hidden in the pressure of the pen against paper. I closed my eyes, listening to her describe the way people reveal themselves in their handwriting. The shaky hand of the liar, the bold strokes of the confident, the gentle curves of the romantic. She knew handwriting the way I did. She understood it wasn't just marks on paper, but extensions of ourselves. When the show ended, I sat in silence, staring at the letter on my coffee table. Whoever sent this knew something about me. About my mother, and somehow, I felt the radio host was connected. The voice that had become my nighttime companion might hold the answers to questions I hadn't even formed yet. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. The Henderson case had escalated overnight, with the family demanding immediate resolution. As I walked down the marble hallway, my heels clicking against the floor, My mind still dwelled on that mysterious letter and the radio voice that had kept me company through another sleepless night. Courtroom 3 billions was already filling with attorneys and assistants when I arrived. Judge Brennan, notorious for his punctuality, would begin proceedings exactly at 9. I set up my equipment at the small table reserved for expert witnesses, arranging my magnifiers and document cameras. That's when I first noticed her. The court reporter, settling in at her stenotype machine near the judge's bench. Brunette hair pulled back in a professional bun, but with a few rebellious strands framing a face that balanced elegant features with an unexpected strength. Her fingers hovered over the keys with practiced precision. When the bailiff called the court to order, she looked up briefly, and our eyes met. Blue eyes, startlingly vivid even across the courtroom. Something in my chest tightened inexplicably. The court calls Maya Mitchell, handwriting expert, the bailiff announced after preliminary statements. I took the stand, focusing on the documents presented. As I testified about the inconsistencies in the signatures, explaining how the pressure patterns revealed forgery, I felt someone watching me intently. Glancing up, I caught the court reporter studying me with unusual interest, not the bored expression court staff typically wore after years of testimony, but genuine curiosity. Ms. Mitchell, can you explain to the jury how you can be certain these signatures weren't made by the same hand? The attorney asked. Handwriting is as unique as the person creating it, I explained, pointing to the projection screen. Notice how genuine signatures have a rhythm, a flow that's difficult to replicate. Like a person's voice, it carries distinctive patterns. At the word voice, the court reporter's head tilted slightly. Our eyes locked again, longer this time. Something familiar flickered in her expression. I stumbled over my next words, uncharacteristically flustered. The cross-examination was aggressive, the defense attorney attempting to undermine my credentials. Throughout it all, I found myself repeatedly drawn to the court reporter, who recorded every word with concentrated precision while occasionally glancing my way. Each time our eyes met, I felt an odd recognition I couldn't place. During the mid-morning recess, I stood in the hallway reviewing my notes when the courthouse alarms suddenly blared. A mechanical voice announced, "This is an earthquake drill. Please proceed to designated safety areas immediately." Court staff directed everyone toward the stairwells. In the ensuing confusion, I found myself pressed against the wall of the cramped northwest stairwell, surrounded by attorneys, clerks, and jurors. A gentle bump against my shoulder made me turn. "Sorry," said the court reporter, her voice low and melodious. "Untight quarters." That voice. I froze, recognition washing over me. "You're Courtney Henderson," she said, extending her hand. "I've watched you testify before. Your knowledge of handwriting is fascinating." Her hand was warm in mine, her grip firm. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes that suggested she was in her late 30s, and a small freckle just below her left temple. "Thanks," I managed. "Been doing this for 15 years, but people's handwriting still surprises me." "I imagine voices do too," she said, with a hint of something in her tone. Before I could respond, the stairwell grew more crowded as people from upper floors joined us. Courtney was pressed closer to me, her perfume subtle but distinct, something with notes of vanilla and amber. We stood in awkward proximity for several minutes, making small talk about courthouse gossip and the tedium of drills. "Ever notice how people reveal themselves under minor stress?" she asked, nodding toward an attorney nervously checking his watch. "Like handwriting under pressure." "You know about handwriting analysis?" I asked, surprised. "I'm interested in all forms of human communication," she replied. "Spoken, written, unspoken." Something in her phrasing tugged at my memory. The drill ended before I could pursue it further, and we all filed back into the courtroom. Throughout the remainder of testimony, I caught her watching me several times. When court adjourned for lunch, I deliberately packed my materials slowly, hoping for another chance to speak with her. "Your testimony was compelling," Courtney said, approaching my table as the courtroom emptied. "Especially the part about rhythm and writing. It's like the cadence in speech, isn't it?" "Exactly," I said, zipping my case closed. "Both reveal patterns most people don't consciously recognize." She smiled, a warm expression that transformed her professional demeanor into something more inviting. "I should get back to transcribing this morning's proceedings," she said. "But it was nice finally talking with you, Maya." As she walked away, I realized I hadn't mentioned my first name during testimony. She'd been paying closer attention than I thought, or she already knew who I was. Either possibility sent a small thrill through me that I wasn't prepared to examine just yet. 3 weeks passed, and I found myself inventing reasons to be in courtrooms where Courtney was working. Just following up on document details, I'd tell colleagues when they spotted me slipping into proceedings I had no business attending. The Henderson case had concluded, but my fascination with the court reporter hadn't. Every night I listened to Midnight Confessions, analyzing the host's voice, comparing it to my memory of Courtney's. The similarities were striking, but I couldn't be certain. The radio voice had a dreamlike quality that was difficult to match with daytime conversations. The courthouse holiday party arrived, a modest affair in the main atrium with punch that was suspiciously fruit-free and cookies from the bakery down the street. I almost skipped it, as I had the previous 4 years, but curiosity drove me there. Would Courtney attend? She did, wearing a deep blue dress that matched her eyes, her usually restrained hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. I watched from across the room as she chatted easily with judges and clerks. The county clerk, already 3 glasses into the evening, announced it was time for the talent portion of the night. "Does anyone have a hidden talent to share?" he asked, gesturing wildly. Several people groaned as he scanned the crowd. "Courtney, you sang last year. Give us another performance." She laughed, shaking her head, but the small crowd encouraged her until she stepped to the center of the atrium. Without accompaniment, she began singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." The first note froze me in place. That voice. The voice that had kept me company through sleepless nights. The midnight scribe stood before me, her secret exposed under fluorescent courthouse lights. After her performance, I made my way through the crowd, heart racing like I was approaching a witness about to break a case wide open. "That was beautiful," I said, startling her slightly. "Maya," she said, her smile warming. "I didn't know you came to these things." "I don't usually. But I'm glad I did tonight, Midnight Scribe." Her smile faltered, then returned more genuinely. "I wondered if you'd recognize my voice eventually. Why didn't you say anything when we met?" "Professional boundaries," she said with a small shrug. "Also, I enjoy the anonymity of radio. It allows people to hear the words without seeing the person." We found a quiet corner away from the festivities, and I told her how her show had become my nightly companion. She seemed pleased but not surprised. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" she asked. "I'd love to hear more about your work with handwriting. It's fascinating, the way we leave ourselves on paper." 2 days later, we met at a small cafe near Pearl Street. Snow fell gently outside, coating Boulder in white silence while we sat by the window. Courtney explained how she'd started the radio show 3 years ago, needing a creative outlet beyond the verbatim transcription of her day job. "Court reporting is exact, precise," she said, warming her hands around her mug. "Every word matters, but there's no room for interpretation. On the radio I can explore the spaces between words." "I understand," I replied. "Sometimes what's not written reveals more than what is. The hesitations and signatures, the pressure variations." We talked for 3 hours, discovering shared passions for language, communication, and the subtle ways humans reveal themselves. She understood my work in ways few others did, and I found her insights into spoken testimony fascinating. Over the next few weeks, we developed a friendship that blended our professional and personal lives. She'd text me observations about witnesses' speech patterns. I'd send her photos of particularly interesting document features. Our conversations extended beyond our initial connection, revealing shared tastes in obscure documentaries and a mutual dislike of seafood. One afternoon, we were organizing court documents for an upcoming fraud case in the courthouse archive room. I'd been asked to authenticate signatures on several contracts, and Courtney was preparing transcripts from preliminary hearings. We worked in comfortable silence for nearly an hour before she spoke. "What drew you to handwriting analysis?" she asked, not looking up from her papers. "The way truth hides in plain sight," I answered. "People lie with words all the time, but their handwriting often betrays them." She nodded, sorting another stack of documents. "Communication is rarely straightforward, isn't it? We say one thing, write another, and mean something else entirely." As I reached for a folder, our hands brushed against each other. The touch lasted barely a second, but the sensation lingered on my skin. Our eyes met, and for a moment, everything in the cramped, dusty room seemed to fade away except for her. Neither of us pulled back immediately. The momentary contact stretched into something meaningful, something that acknowledged the growing connection between us. When she finally withdrew her hand, I could still feel the ghost of her touch on my fingers, like invisible ink slowly revealing itself. Courtney and I had been meeting regularly for coffee, dinner, and occasional walks around Boulder's reservoir. Winter had settled firmly over the city, transforming our outings into snowy adventures. One evening, as we sat in her apartment with cups of mulled wine, our conversation drifted to family. "Did you always know you wanted to be a court reporter?" I asked, watching snowflakes collect on her windowsill. "Oh no," Courtney laughed, tucking her legs beneath her on the couch. "I wanted to be a novelist. My mother pushed me towards something more practical." "Embellished, your mom sounds like mine," I said. "I'd always worried about security." She took a sip of wine, her blue eyes thoughtful over the rim of her mug. "Can I ask you something personal? After revealing I listen to your radio show every night, I think we're past formalities. What's your relationship with your parents like now?" The question caught me off guard. "Complicated," I admitted. "We don't talk much since they moved to Arizona. Your folks?" "Dad died when I was in college. Mom and we have our differences." She paused, setting down her mug. "Actually, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." The serious shift in her tone made me sit straighter. "What is it? Remember that forgery case last month, the insurance documents?" When I nodded, she continued, "It got me thinking about my own paperwork. I pulled out my birth certificate for a passport renewal and noticed something odd." "What kind of odd?" My professional interest piqued. "Inconsistencies in the paper type, ink absorption patterns. Things most people wouldn't notice, but after hearing you testify so many times..." I set my wine down. "You think your birth certificate is forged?" "I don't know," she said. "But my blood type doesn't match either of my parents." When I mentioned it to my mother, she got defensive, changed the subject. Her confession hung in the air between us. After a moment, I found myself sharing something I'd told no one else. I discovered something similar. During a case study for analyst certification, we practiced with our own documents. My birth certificate showed micro-inconsistencies. Paper aging didn't match the ink degradation. "What did you do?" Courtney asked, leaning forward. "Nothing. My parents became evasive when I brought it up, and I got busy with work. But it's always lingered in the back of my mind. The realization that we shared this unusual mystery created a new bond between us. Have you tried looking into hospital records?" "Records from my birth hospital were lost in a fire years ago." "Convenient, right?" We spent hours that night theorizing, our professional training forming the foundation for increasingly personal questions. Why would parents hide the truth? Were we adopted? What secrets could be worth decades of deception? As the evening grew later and our wine glasses emptied, our conversation shifted from analytical to emotional. Courtney's voice cracked when she described her mother's angry reaction to questions about her birth. "Sometimes I wonder if everything I think I know about myself is just fictional," she said softly. I moved beside her on the couch, our shoulders touching. "I know what you mean. Like you're reading someone else's biography but living it as your own." Boulder's winter night had grown bitter cold outside. But in Courtney's apartment, a different kind of warmth was building between us. Not just the intellectual connection we'd established over the past month, but something more fundamental. Two people recognizing a shared uncertainty about their very origins. The next day, I found myself researching birth certificate forgeries outside of work hours. I created a timeline of inconsistencies in my own documentation, noting paper stock changes in Colorado records during the year of my birth. When Courtney called, I invited her to my apartment to share my findings. She arrived with takeout and a folder of her own research. We spread our investigative work across my dining table, creating a makeshift caseboard like we were detectives in a crime drama, rather than two women questioning their pasts. "The registrar's stamp on mine is slightly offset," she pointed out. Like it was added after the form was completed. As we worked, a snow squall blew in, coating Boulder in another layer of white. The storm intensified until the power flickered and died, leaving us in sudden darkness. "Perfect timing," I sighed, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. The beam caught Courtney's face, illuminating her features in soft light. Standing close in the darkness, the boundaries of our friendship suddenly felt as uncertain as our origins. My heart raced as she stepped closer. "Maybe some mysteries are meant to be solved together," she whispered. Outside, snow continued falling, insulating us from the world. In that charged moment of darkness, with documents about our questionable past spread around us, I leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were soft, warm, tasting faintly of the tea we'd been drinking. For a second, she seemed surprised. Then she was kissing me back, her hand finding my waist. When we pulled apart, the power flashed back on, flooding the room with light. Our research lay forgotten as we looked at each other with new understanding. Whatever truth we might uncover about our pasts, this moment, this connection, was undeniably real. The kiss changed everything and nothing. We still researched our mysterious pasts, but now our work sessions ended with tender moments that left me breathless. Professional colleagues by day, something much more by night. I'd never felt this way about a woman before, but with Courtney, everything felt natural, inevitable. 2 weeks after our first kiss, I brought a special gift to her apartment, a professional analysis kit for document examination. I thought we could look at your adoption papers together, I said, setting up my portable lightbox on her dining table. Courtney hesitated. I'm not sure they're adoption papers. My mother never used that word. Whatever they are, I can help analyze them properly. I squeezed her hand. No more amateur detective work. With obvious reluctance, she retrieved a folder from her bedroom safe. The documents inside were yellowed with age, legal papers, medical records, and what appeared to be transfer forms. These were in my mother's safety deposit box, she explained. I only got access after her stroke last year. I pulled on cotton gloves before handling the papers. Even at first glance, the documents troubled me. The paper stock, watermarks, and notary stamps all appeared authentic, but something about the signatures raised red flags. The same person signed multiple different names here, I said, pointing to subtle consistencies across different signatures. See how the R forms are identical? And the baseline drift on these 3 signatures matches perfectly. Courtney leaned closer. Could it be coincidence? Statistically improbable. I adjusted my light to examine the ink. And there's something else. The form style, the courthouse notations, they're nearly identical to ones in my file. Our eyes met, the implication heavy between us. That's impossible, she whispered. Your records are from Boulder County, mine are from Denver. For hours, we compared her documents to copies of my own, finding disturbing similarities despite coming from different counties and hospitals. The paper stock was identical. The form layouts matched, despite supposedly originating from different institutions. Most telling, several signatures on both sets of documents appeared to come from the same hand. Someone processed both our cases, I concluded, sitting back. Someone who worked across county lines, who had authority to handle adoption, or... I hesitated. Or what? Courtney pressed. Or transfers. These look like transfer documents more than adoptions. My throat felt dry. Courtney, I think we might have been part of something bigger than private adoptions. We stayed up until dawn, spreading papers across her living room floor, creating timelines and connection maps like I did for complex forgery cases. By morning, we had more questions than answers, but one certainty had emerged. Our pasts were linked by more than coincidence. As the sun rose over the Flatirons, casting Courtney's apartment in golden light, she sat beside me on the floor, both of us exhausted but unwilling to stop. What do we do now? She asked, leaning her head against my shoulder. We need more information. I turned to face her. I know a retired clerk from the 80s who might recognize these form types. Later that morning, despite our exhaustion, we drove to a retirement community on Boulder's outskirts. Harold Weber had worked in records for 30 years, spanning both Boulder and Denver counties. If anyone could identify our mysterious documents, it would be him. Harold examined our papers carefully, his aged hands surprisingly steady. When he finished, his expression had darkened considerably. Where did you get these? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. When there are personal records, Courtney explained. We've found inconsistencies. Stop looking, he interrupted. These aren't regular documents. They have the markers. Oh, what markers? I demanded. Harold glanced around, though we were alone in his small apartment. Private program. County officials weren't supposed to ask questions. Special cases processed through a foundation with political connections. What kind of special cases? Courtney's voice shook slightly. Baby transfers, not regular adoptions. He pushed the papers back toward us. Listen carefully. People who asked questions about these records in the 80s had accident-prone families. Understand? Stop digging. His warning followed us back to Courtney's apartment, where we collapsed on her couch, emotionally drained. "We can't stop," I said finally. "Whatever this is, it's our history." She nodded, then took my hand, interlacing our fingers. "Whatever we find, we face it together." The intensity of the moment overwhelmed us both. Months of growing attraction, weeks of shared investigation, and now this sense of facing an unknown past together. It all culminated in a passion I couldn't contain. I kissed her deeply, feeling her respond with equal fervor. What followed was a release of tension and fear, transformed into something beautiful between us. In her bedroom, curtains drawn against the coming night, we discovered each other completely for the first time, our bodies communicating what words couldn't express. Every touch was a promise that whatever truth we uncovered, we wouldn't face it alone. Blending my life with Courtney's happened so naturally I barely noticed the transition. We carpooled to the courthouse, shared lunches in the park when weather permitted, and spent evenings alternating between research and discovering each other. February in Boulder brought heavy snow, giving us perfect excuses to stay in, bodies entwined under blankets while we theorized about our mysterious origins. I should have anticipated the office gossip. The courthouse was its own ecosystem of rumors and speculation. The first hint came when Judge Morris's clerk delivered case files with a knowing smile. "You and Henderson seem close lately," she commented casually. "Nice to see you making friends." By the following week the whispers had solidified. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Nothing malicious, but the attention made me uncomfortable. Our professional reputations had always been our armor, and now people were seeing beyond that. "Does it bother you?" I asked Courtney over lunch in the courthouse cafeteria. "The talk?" She glanced around at the tables of attorneys and staff, some watching us with poorly disguised interest. "It complicates things. Yesterday, Sanders asked if I should be recused from cases where you testify." "That's ridiculous," I said, perhaps too loudly. "Your transcriptions are verbatim. Our personal life doesn't change that." "Personal life," she repeated with a small smile. "Is that what we're calling it?" Despite the lightness in her tone, I recognized the underlying concern. We both valued our professional reputations. Our careers depended on absolute neutrality and trust. That evening, as we reviewed more documents, Courtney seemed distracted. "Oh, maybe we should cool things at work," she suggested finally. "Keep our distance professionally." "Is that what you want?" I tried to keep the hurt from my voice. "No," she admitted. "But I've worked 15 years to be taken seriously. You've done the same. We need to be careful." She was right, of course. But the idea of pretending we were just colleagues felt impossible now that I knew how she sighed my name in the darkness, how her body fit perfectly against mine. "Let's get away," I suggested impulsively. "This weekend. Up to Estes Park. No documents, no courthouse gossip, just us." The relief in her smile told me it was exactly what we needed. 2 days later, we were driving up the winding mountain roads, Boulder receding behind us. The small cabin I'd rented was secluded, surrounded by snow-laden pines and views of pristine white mountains. Inside, a stone fireplace dominated the living room. Courtney immediately set about building a fire while I unpacked groceries. Domesticity felt comfortable with her, like we'd been sharing these simple tasks for years instead of weeks. "No research this weekend," she reminded me, catching me staring at her as flames began to catch the kindling. "You promised." "I'm not thinking about research," I said honestly, moving behind her to wrap my arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about how much I want you." She turned in my arms, her blue eyes reflecting the growing firelight. "Show me." The cabin's main room transformed into our sanctuary. Firelight painted her skin with golden hues as clothing fell away. I traced the curve of her hip, the soft plane of her stomach, memorizing her body in a way different from our previous encounters. This was unhurried, deliberate. My lips followed where my hands led, drawing soft moans from her that mingled with the crackling fire. Later, breathless and entwined on the rug before the hearth, she whispered, "I've never felt this way before." I knew exactly what she meant. This wasn't just physical desire or intellectual companionship. It was something more complete, as if we'd found missing pieces of ourselves in each other. The weekend passed in a haze of lovemaking, hiking through snow-covered trails, and conversations that had nothing to do with missing records or mysterious pasts. We cooked elaborate meals in the cabin's small kitchen, opened wine we'd brought from Boulder, and let ourselves imagine a future unburdened by unanswered questions. On Sunday afternoon, as we reluctantly packed to return, Courtney gasped while checking her phone. "Maya, look at this." She showed me an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read simply, "Pine Haven Medical Center." "What's Pine Haven?" I asked, scanning the brief message. "That's the thing. I don't know. But the email says both our birth records trace back there, and it's not in either county we thought." Our weekend bubble burst instantly. How would someone know what we're researching? "Harold?" she suggested. "Or someone at the courthouse noticed the documents we've been analyzing." I took her phone, reading the email again. The sender had included an address for a facility that had apparently closed in 1988, just years after both our births. "Do we trust this?" I asked. Courtney's expression was resolute. "We need to know, whatever it is." Back in Boulder that evening, we expanded our search to include Pine Haven Medical Center. Initial results were sparse. A private facility that operated from 1975 to 1988, specializing in maternal care and family creation services. "Family creation," I repeated skeptically. "What does that even mean?" Courtney scrolled through more search results. "Wait, here's something. A lawsuit filed in 1990 against Pine Haven by 3 families. It was settled quietly, records sealed." We shared a look, both recognizing that our weekend reprieve had ended. Whatever connected us, not just to each other, but to our unknown origins, was deeper and perhaps darker than we'd imagined. Armed with new information about Pine Haven Medical Center, our investigation intensified. I called in a week of vacation time from the courthouse, claiming personal matters. Courtney arranged coverage for her court reporting duties, citing family emergency. Neither was entirely a lie. This search for our origins had become both personal and urgent. We converted my apartment into an investigation headquarters. Documents covered every surface: birth certificates, medical records, newspaper clippings about Pine Haven, printouts of archived websites. The more we uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. "Look at this," Courtney said one evening, holding up 2 birth certificates, hers and mine. The signatures for the attending physician. Dr. Wilson on yours, Dr. Williams on mine. But the handwriting. I examined both documents under my professional magnifier. Same person, different names, I confirmed. The pressure patterns on the W are identical, the loop closure on the S, too. One person signing as different doctors on birth certificates from supposedly different hospitals. We'd been finding these connections for days, evidence that our documents had been processed by the same hands despite supposedly coming from different facilities. "I need to run these through better equipment," I said. "The courthouse lab has a digital analysis system that could confirm match percentages." The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early, before most staff. Using my expert witness credentials, I accessed the document analysis lab and began scanning our birth certificates into the system. The program would compare minute details of handwriting far beyond what the human eye could detect. As the computer processed the files, a voice from the doorway startled me. "Ms. Mitchell? Working early?" I turned to find Judge Morris watching me curiously. "Just preparing for the Donovan case," I lied, casually moving to block the screen. "Interesting. The Donovan case was reassigned last week." His eyes drifted to the birth certificates on the scanner. "Personal research on courthouse equipment?" My heart raced. "Just a quick verification. Family documents." "I see." His expression remained neutral. "Ms. Henderson has also taken unexpected leave." Coincidental timing. Before I could respond, the computer chimed with results. 96% probability that the signatures came from the same hand. The evidence we needed, but now witnessed by a judge who clearly suspected something. "Maya," he said, using my first name for the first time in our professional relationship, "whatever you're investigating, be careful. Some old cases are better left closed." Another warning, similar to Harold's. What were people so afraid we'd find? I gathered the documents hastily. "Thank you, Your Honor. It's nothing important." His knowing look suggested he didn't believe me, but he stepped aside to let me pass. When I returned to my apartment, Courtney was on the phone. Her expression was tense, excited. "That was a former nurse who worked at Pine Haven," she explained after hanging up. "She agreed to meet us. Tonight." The meeting location was a diner off Highway 36, halfway to Denver. The nurse, Ellen Reeves, was in her 70s now, thin and nervous, her eyes constantly checking the door as if expecting trouble. "I shouldn't be talking to you," she said immediately. "But when you mentioned those birth years and the document transfers, I couldn't sleep." "What happened at Pine Haven?" Courtney asked gently. Ellen's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "It started as legitimate fertility treatments. Then the director got involved with some foundation that had theories about genetic matching and trait selection." "What kind of trait selection?" I asked, dread building. "Intelligence, artistic ability, physical features. They believed they could create ideal family units by matching certain infants with parents seeking specific traits." She lowered her voice. "Some babies were moved around, paperwork altered. Parents were told their babies hadn't survived or had complications requiring transfers. Were we part of this?" Courtney's voice was barely audible. Ellen wouldn't meet our eyes. "The years you mentioned were the peak of the program. Records were coded, blue files for babies selected for placement based on projected intelligence, green for artistic potential." My mind raced, remembering the color-coded tabs on our files. Blue for me, green for Courtney. "Do you know our birth parents?" I asked. "Those records were kept separate, highly restricted. But there's one thing." Ellen stopped abruptly, staring past us, her face drained of color. I turned to see what had frightened her. Through the diner window, a dark sedan had parked directly across from us, its headlights illuminating our table like a spotlight. "I've said too much," Ellen whispered, gathering her purse. "They still watch." The foundation had powerful backers. "Wait," Courtney grabbed her wrist. "Who's watching? Who should we be afraid of?" Ellen pulled away. "Look at your birth certificates again. The watermarks. They're serialized, not standard government issue. Find others with the same patterns." With that cryptic advice, she hurried from the diner, hunched against the night as if trying to disappear. We stayed frozen at our table, watching as the mysterious sedan remained parked outside for several long minutes before finally driving away. Ellen's warning about the watermarks sent us into a new investigative frenzy. Back at my apartment, we examined our birth certificates under ultraviolet light, revealing previously invisible patterns, serialized markings embedded in the paper itself. "These aren't government watermarks," I confirmed, photographing the patterns. "Private paper stock, custom made." "Can you trace it?" Courtney asked, her shoulder pressed against mine as we hunched over the documents. "Maybe. I have a contact at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing who specializes in historical paper documentation." My contact confirmed our suspicions. 2 days later, the paper was manufactured for a private foundation called New Horizons Genetic Research, which had operated from the mid-1970s through the late 1980s before dissolving under mysterious circumstances. "Genetic research," Courtney repeated, pacing my living room. "This confirms what Ellen told us. We were selected, Maya, chosen for some kind of experiment." The realization that we had been treated as specimens rather than babies made me physically ill, but it also strengthened my determination. Using the nurse's clue about serialized watermarks, we posted carefully worded messages on adoption forums, seeking others with similar document anomalies. Responses came slowly at first, then in a flood. Dozens of adults born between 1976 and 1985 who had discovered inconsistencies in their birth documentation. Many reported the same color coding system Ellen had mentioned. Blue files, green files, even red and yellow designations. We meticulously mapped each response, creating a constellation of affected families across Colorado and neighboring states. The pattern was clear. New Horizons had operated a sophisticated network for selecting and placing babies according to their genetic potential. "We need to find someone who worked there," I said, reviewing our growing evidence board. Not just a nurse, someone who knew the whole operation. The breakthrough came when Courtney recognized a name while transcribing testimony for an unrelated case. Dr. Margaret Wilson, formerly a pediatric specialist, now retired and living in Boulder. The same name that appeared on my birth certificate. "It can't be coincidence," Courtney insisted. "We have to talk to her." Dr. Wilson lived in an elegant home in the foothills. When we arrived unannounced, I expected resistance, perhaps even a door slammed in our faces. Instead, the elderly woman who answered regarded us with sad recognition. "I've been expecting someone to come for years," she said, inviting us in. "I just didn't know it would be you two together." Her living room walls displayed framed degrees and awards from a distinguished medical career. but when she sat across from us, her hands trembled slightly. "Your signatures appear on both our birth certificates," I began, though under different names. "We know about Pinehaven and New Horizons." She didn't deny it. The Foundation approached brilliant doctors with promises of advancing genetic science. By the time we realized their true agenda, we were complicit. "What agenda?" Courtney demanded. "Creating optimized family units, matching infants with specific genetic markers to parents who would nurture those traits. Some were placed with accomplished musicians, others with academics or athletes." She looked directly at us. "You two were part of the linguistic cohort, babies showing markers for exceptional language processing." The revelation stunned us both. Our careers, my analysis of written language, Courtney's relationship with spoken words, suddenly seemed less like choices and more like predetermined paths. "Our birth parents," I managed to ask, "were we actually orphans, or were we taken?" Dr. Wilson's expression confirmed our worst fears before she spoke. "Most infants in the program came from young mothers told their babies had died during delivery. A few were legitimate adoptions redirected into the program." "That's kidnapping," Courtney whispered. "Yes." The doctor's admission hung in the air. What the Foundation did was criminal. When investigators started asking questions in the late 80s, everything was buried. Records destroyed. Staff paid for silence. "But you kept records," I stated, not asking. She nodded slowly. "Insurance. And perhaps penance." From a hidden safe, she produced a thin folder containing what we'd sought for months, our original birth records, unaltered. As I opened it with gloved hands, the truth finally revealed itself in black and white. Courtney and I were not related. We'd been born to different mothers in different hospitals. But our genetic tests had shown similar language processing patterns, marking us for the same program track. We had been sorted, labeled, and reassigned based on a eugenic vision of human potential. "There were dozens like you," Dr. Wilson said quietly. "Children whose lives were redirected based on their genetic promise." As we left, carrying copies of our true birth records, the weight of knowledge felt both liberating and crushing. We were not who we'd been raised to believe. Yet in finding this truth together, we'd formed a connection deeper than any genetic manipulation could explain. That night, walking along Boulder Creek as sunset painted the Flatirons pink, Courtney laced her fingers through mine. "Does knowing change anything between us?" I considered the question carefully. It explains how we found each other, but not why we chose each other. She stopped walking, turning to face me. Her kiss tasted of certainty, a choice made freely, not programmed by genetic destiny. Whatever forces had altered our beginnings, our future belonged only to us. 3 months after discovering the truth about our origins, I stood before Judge Morris and a packed courtroom, my expert testimony now focused on something far more personal than forged signatures. "Ms. Mitchell, please explain to the court what these document inconsistencies reveal," the prosecutor asked. "These birth certificates and medical records show systematic falsification across dozens of cases," I testified, pointing to evidence displays. "The handwriting analysis confirms that the same individuals created documentation for at least 38 babies through the New Horizons program." From my witness position, I could see Courtney at her stenography machine, recording every word with professional precision. Only I noticed the slight tremor in her fingers, the emotion she contained while transcribing testimony about our shared history. The case against New Horizons Foundation had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. After taking our evidence to the district attorney, a task force had been formed, identifying dozens of now adult victims of the baby trafficking operation. Criminal charges had been filed against the surviving directors and medical staff who had participated in the scheme. Dr. Wilson had turned state's witness, providing crucial testimony in exchange for immunity. Her detailed records had become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, helping families discover their true origins after decades of deception. "And in your professional opinion, could these document alterations have occurred without institutional knowledge?" The prosecutor continued. "Impossible," I stated firmly. "This was a coordinated effort requiring medical staff, administrative personnel, and county officials. The consistency of the forgeries proves it was systematic." When court recessed for the day, Courtney met me in the hallway, maintaining our professional distance in public even now. But her eyes spoke volumes. "You were brilliant," she said quietly as we walked toward the exit. "Clear, authoritative, They believed every word. Because it's true, I replied. And because I've spent my life learning to read what's written between the lines. Outside the courthouse, spring had transformed Boulder. Cherry blossoms lined Pearl Street, and the mountains had exchanged their snow caps for green. We'd both taken apartments in the same building now, maintaining separate addresses while spending most nights together, a compromise between our private relationship and public professionalism. That evening, we met with 3 other Foundation babies we'd connected with through the investigation. Over dinner, we shared stories of discovery, comparing notes on our genetic assignments and the lives we'd built, either in fulfillment of or rebellion against those predetermined paths. "Do you ever wonder who you might have become otherwise?" asked Rachel, a concert pianist who had been selected for her musical potential. "Sometimes," Courtney admitted. "But then I remember that we're more than whatever they tried to make us. Our choices matter more than their plans." After our guests left, we sat on my balcony watching twilight settle over Boulder. The news coverage of the trial had brought dozens more families forward, creating a network of support for those whose lives had been manipulated from birth. "I've been thinking about the Foundation," I said, taking Courtney's hand. "Not New Horizons, a new one. For helping people access their true records, find their birth families if they want to." She smiled, interlacing our fingers, using our expertise to undo the damage they caused. "I like it." "We could call it Written Origins," I suggested, combining both our specialties. Speaking of writing things down, Courtney reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 small envelopes. I had an idea. Inside each envelope was a blank card and a fountain pen. "And Cy thought we could write our own vows," she explained. "Not legal marriage. That might complicate work for now. But our own private commitment, written in our own hands." My voice caught as I understood her intention. "Analyzing handwriting has shown me that we reveal our truest selves in what we write by hand," I said, taking one of the pens. "There's nothing I'd rather commit to paper than my love for you." That weekend, as autumn leaves swirled around us on Flagstaff Mountain overlooking Boulder, we exchanged our handwritten promises. No officiants, no witnesses, just 2 women whose lives had been linked by an unethical experiment, but who had chosen to forge a connection greater than any that had been designed for them. "I promise to help you uncover every truth, face every mystery, and write every page of our story together," Courtney read, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I traced the signature on my own vows before reading them aloud, recognizing the unique patterns that made her handwriting as distinctive as her fingerprints. In this moment, we weren't expert and stenographer, weren't specimens or subjects. We were simply 2 people who had found each other across improbable circumstances, choosing to sign our names to a shared future neither of us had been born to expect, but both of us had decided to create.